Mr. Maheer Chebbo, the founder and CEO of CTECHNOLOGYS. He's broadcasting from Paris, France right now. CTECHNOLOGYS, the entity supported by General Electric and focusing on digital venture capital, board advisory, and digital energy transition ventures. And Mr. Chebbo is PhD in energy. He has 30 years of private energy industry's digital and venture leadership roles and 15 years of public board leadership roles. And just listen for his styles. The founder and CEO of CTECHNOLOGYS, the board observer of Greencom Networks, SVP and Global Chief Innovation Officer of GE Digital Energy Solutions, General Manager Energy Industries for Europe, Middle East and Africa at SAP, and co-founder SAP Corporate Venturing for 21 years, Director of Software Engineering, Utilities and Telecom at Capgemini, the Chair of the Governing Board at REEP, Chair of the ETIP Batteries European Digital Task Force, Co-Chair of the Smart Grids, Board Member of Ermines. I'm super excited of having right now Mr. Maheer Chebbo. Mr. Chebbo, you're online. You're welcome. Please give us your vision at topic entitled Digital Accelerating the Energy Transition and Batteries Leadership of Europe. We are listening to you carefully.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here today to present the role of the digitalization as a major innovation to help the energy transition for a decarbonized world. I will be speaking very much about my involvement for the last 15 years in the smart grids, digital energy transition in Europe, and also the activities we are doing in terms of using the digitalization of the batteries to accelerate that transition to a decarbonized Europe. Now, if we look at these different cities, what would be in common between all these beautiful cities that we have in Europe? I should have maybe added Moscow or Kiev or other beautiful cities as well in Europe. What they have in common is the investments all these cities they are doing since many years, and the roadmap they have for energy efficiency, for carbon neutrality, for more renewables deployment in these cities, and much better transportation and logistics. If we consider the energy production and the energy consumption in buildings, and if we consider the whole transportation and logistics, this probably represents 60 to 70% of the emissions. And a lot of these cities are focusing on these sectors. Now, they are investing on the energy transition and better climate. If you look at these numbers are huge, actually. So today, Europe has announced $1 trillion in terms of public and private investments for a Green Deal to help preparing till 2050 Europe with a cleaner economy, and use that cleaner economy for creating jobs and re-dynamizing the economy as well. We estimate that a program of a Horizon Europe, which is the funding of Europe for innovation and research and innovation in different sectors of the economy, to be 100 billion, and 30 to 35% of that is dedicated to energy and climate. There is also an innovation fund helping the innovation in different sectors, and particularly in the energy and climate, which is also about 10 billion. Huge investments that were estimated to be around 250 billion annual market by 2025, and also huge investments in the energy efficiency, in IoT, Internet of Things technologies, whether it's for massive customers or commercial industrial customers. Distributed energy resources, about 110 billion in 2017, and this is growing fast to close to 380 billion in 2026. And smart cities is growing to 135 billion in 2021, according to the IDC. So that's good to have milestones. In Europe, there are milestones 2020, which is an exceptional year. I mean, nobody expected 15 years ago when the targets for 2020 were fixed that we will have a very exceptional year, particularly with the COVID and what's happening and the need for resiliency. But luckily, the people believe and the states believe that energy and climate investments will be contributing, despite the COVID, will be contributing to still creating jobs and redynamizing the economies. Other targets in 2030, more targets 2050, where here we should look for a decarbonized Europe. Now, in the work that happened with a committee looking after the energy transition committee of the EDIPSNet in Europe, there was a report produced in 2018, mid of 2018, which explains that we should look at the energy as a holistic view. We should not look at the electricity or gas or heating and so on separately. We should look at all of that together as a holistic view. So the convergence of view on energy, and then also look at the different sources of converting things. So converting from power to heat, from heat to electricity, and the importance of the different liquefied and hydrogen and so on. All of these energy sources and their conversion will be part also of the landscape, and the importance of having the data and the digitalization across the whole infrastructure. This is why we have produced a couple of reports, a short one for policymakers and a more technical one about the digitalization, the technologies, the level of their maturity, and then the use cases that are needed for the digitalization, which could help with creating more flexibility of the electricity, better managing the peak demand, better managing as well the shift to a decentralized energy generation and renewables everywhere, whether it's photovoltaics, wind turbines, or other energy communities. So what are the areas of digitalization that are today, I would not say will, but are today innovative, and on which a lot of investments are going on, and these investments will be growing? So we have been very good, I would say, into managing processes across the whole energy infrastructure. So how to run a power plant, how to run the assets of a power plant, how to run the production of the energy and bringing the energy to the transmission and distribution networks, to manage the whole transmission and distribution grid networks, and to manage as well the commercial selling to the end customers, contracting with them, billing them, following all the customers and doing all the customer relationship management. So all of these processes, typically products like SAP, for example, do it well and cover it very well across the whole value chain. Where the need is about the data and predicting what will happen in the future, and this is predictive analytics. Predicting when something wrong will happen in a plant or will happen at wind turbines, predicting when something wrong will happen, for example, in the infrastructure, or like networks, and predicting also the output of power, the demand of the customers, and matching the whole thing that you have an optimal system. Predicting the peak demand as well, and how we can shift it or reduce it, that at the end we don't continue to build a new infrastructure, but to optimize with the infrastructure that we have in place, the customer's demand and also the supply for these customers. So predictive analytics is the big thing, and this is where we speak about digital platforms, and we speak about collecting all the data, running all the data with data scientist models, and then predicting what will happen and preparing the whole infrastructure to avoid bottlenecks. Simulation is the big areas why the role of the data scientist is important. So we're moving from just reporting on things and reporting on data to more simulate and predict what will happen. If you take other sectors than energy, like the medicine, for example, there is a lot of prediction as well. Models in where we invest to predict, for example, the cancer, to predict the genomics data. There is a lot of sectors, finance sector as well, where the prediction is extremely important and where people are watching, where this or that share price would be. The energy sector also is in a big need of that. We use the digital twin to get the mirror of what's happening on the physical assets, physical infrastructure, and on that mirror image, using the data, we could predict what will happen to the tubes, what will happen to the networks, what will happen to the turbines or the pumps or whatever transformers or equipments we have. Cybersecurity to get the whole infrastructure robust. The whole industrial IoT is about collecting the data from the assets and running that through data science models, and all kind of electronic marketplaces that could help exchanging, for example, between distribution grid companies and retailers. And then we see all the kind of solutions around digital workers, digital inspections, using sometimes drones, the whole management of the energy portfolio, management of the peak demand through energy flexibility, and integration of a massive number of distributed energy resources on the grid. All of that has to happen using technologies of AI, machine learning, and a growing use of blockchain, making sure that we comply with the environment, we keep the security of supply and independence of the energy as much as possible vis-a-vis the other exporters of energy, and then have an open markets where you have competition and where you have any customer who could request any service in the country where he is, or in the region where he or she is, like for example here the European Union. So when we speak about the transformation of the energy and the transition, we speak about 3Ds. 3Ds is decarbonizing the energy, is reducing the carbon footprint, is getting to the carbon neutrality. Secondly is about the decentralization, is getting from the picture, which is here like a classical linear picture from left to right, to something which is more decentral, where you have generators of energy, clean energy everywhere, photovoltaics, wind turbine, energy communities, and also battery storage everywhere. And the third D is about digitalization. We cannot manage what we cannot measure. We have to manage the system in a more sophisticated way, both ways, predict what the demand is, and provide and supply the energy to match that demand. And digitalization has an incremental value. According to the World Economic Forum, $2 trillion of value can be unlocked due to the digitalization, which is needed in the whole energy sector. And then you have the electrification. We will have more and more increase of demand. And that increase of demand will come also from the shift from the oil and gas and gas stations and thermal cars to more electrical cars. So we expect an increase of that demand by about 40% by 2050. So the impact of technology is a huge. Technology and digitalization will be everywhere. The shift from a central to a decentralized system implies a very sophisticated management of the distributed resources. It implies as well that we need to keep the system very robust in terms of integrity, cybersecurity, real-time decisions, and overall optimization. And also it implies, when it comes to the electrification and the increased number of batteries in the landscape, whether we are speaking about stationary batteries or mobile batteries, like in the EV, electrical vehicle cars, it implies also to integrate them properly in the whole energy system. So to the 3Ds I'm speaking about, we need to add another D, which is the democratized. If you have a very sophisticated car, but it's not easy to drive, then you are losing a lot of the value of that car. If you have a very sophisticated smart system, but users cannot use it with simplicity and so on, it's not democratized, then you are losing the value of that smart system. So that's what the democratization means, is giving the users platform, a workplace or a portal access, which could be like a one-stop shop, a universal access, user-friendly to whatever energy suppliers or energy services, or even bundle of energy services with other services anywhere where they live. And they could have that as simple as Googling, for example. And then they could look at these services that are available and the energy suppliers and their products and services. They could also order what they need and click that like you would do it on Amazon. And for that, you need to do what happened in the telecom industry, where all the system operators, whether the ones in charge of the assets, telecom networks, or the ones in charge of the services, like telecom services providers, or the equipment providers, to work all together and to make it easy for the end user or the end consumer. I would call them even prosumers, because the consumers could also interact with the system where they could produce energy as well as consume energy, and also make it very easy for them to get renewable energy production simple for them, equip their houses, for example, or their flats with renewable energy. Everything that could transform a passive consumer, passive user to a more active user, like we see it in telecom, where the users of mobile phones are very active, and also transform them and their flats into smart flats and to become also prosumers. All of that is the democratization of the access to energy. Now, speaking about the other important sector in the energy transition is also the transportation, which counts in terms of transportation and logistics for about 30% of the energy consumed, 30% of the emissions. So this is the picture where this transportation sector will have to move to more e-mobility and green e-mobility, with the touch points between the digitalization side and I would say the mechanical side. Mechanical side will be looking at really the batteries as a technology in itself. We'll be looking at the vehicle efficiency. We'll be looking at how to charge, for example, the vehicle. The digitalization side will be looking at how to manage the whole traffic, how to manage where you need to charge your vehicle, for example, when you are doing hundreds of kilometers and you have a battery autonomy of a maximum 500 kilometers. The autonomous driving, the business of autonomous driving is a huge one. And this is a big game changer, particularly for Tesla as well, who is announcing that and will be delivering solutions for this. A company called Mobileye, which has been acquired by Intel, is a 15 billion acquisition. It's the largest acquisition that Intel has done. It's in the area of autonomous driving, for instance. So the objectives of clean mobility is to have the choice and the availability for the customers everywhere at an acceptable cost of ownership. That they could buy an electrical vehicle tomorrow, like they would buy a thermal car, almost the same price. Reduce the carbon emissions on the whole road transportation, and then have the EVs playing an active role in the electrical system, which has to be also prepared to avoid instability on the networks. Today, if you have maybe more than 20% of EVs compared to the total cars that are on the planet, you will create a lot of instability on the networks, and this is why you need to prepare them. The batteries have to play a competitive role and help the automotive sector to stay in the leadership, particularly in Europe, decrease the dependency on scarce raw materials, and think with discovery models and research and innovation on new raw materials that could be used and keep the cost of ownership for the batteries acceptable, and the whole preparation of how to get that as part of a manufacturing world where you can recycle batteries. There is a manufacturer, for example, in Sweden called Northvolt, and they do 100% recycled batteries for cars. And then making sure you have the batteries part of the whole energy system, and having all the functions and features like self-driving, for example, and connected cars with overall traffic management included. So we looked at the whole value chain, and we looked at how to optimize the whole value chain of discovery, research and development, production, maintenance, usage, and how the cars and their batteries could be used in the system, and the whole end of life cycle of the batteries. So we said, where the digitalization needs to be used, where do we have technologies that are ready, mature, where do we need still investments in the maturity of these technologies, and what are the use cases that are needed. For example, the idea is to define like a digital passport, for example, for batteries that have the whole history of the battery, from the way it was designed, to get out of the factory, how it was used, the carbon footprint behind it, the recyclability, for example, of the batteries, all of that part of the circular economy and the CO2 footprint, for example, efforts. So that picture is an interesting one we have drafted in the expert group on the digital batteries in Europe, which explains the whole need for preparing and working on getting in every part or phase of that value chain what are the technologies and the use cases that are needed, get them ready to the market, define some standards in this area, and make sure when it comes to the user cycle, we have a full integration between the battery technology, the battery usage as part of the energy system. Now, I would like to conclude with the takeaways or recommendations, how can we achieve an accelerated energy transition. So we should start by defining what are the needs, what are the market trends, what are the needs, what are also the pain points that we could see here and there on some markets. We should list the technologies and the use cases and see their stage of maturity, their feasibility versus the return they could provide. And also make sure that if we bring in new technologies or new services or use cases to the market, we keep them simple and we keep them affordable and accessible. And then measure the value generated through quick experiments, quick pilots. And then after we measure the value and the learnings from the quick experiments or quick pilots, go for a rollout or scale up. So the key to an accelerated energy transition is also to consider the regulation and the policy and remove the barriers, for example, for opening the market. Remove the barriers or make the systems robust in terms of security and privacy as well. Make sure that nobody fears anything. We need, for that complex energy transformation where we have conversions between different energy sources, and as we have seen it in telecom, a good cooperation between the system operators and equipment providers, is to build also consortiums with important industry collaboration. Initiatives like the Green Deal or the Horizon Europe and so on are typically initiatives where you need consortiums of many partners from many countries to work together and to collaborate from different stakeholder categories. And then piloting, learning, looking at the maturity of technologies, looking at the feasibility of the use cases, measuring the value, and then from measuring the value, moving from pilots to a massive scale up. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Maheer Chebbo. And we have got one interesting question for you right now. Can we measure the value generated from digital energy transition? May you answer?
And I recommend to measure it, as I said in the conclusion. So you can go very deep in calculating the as-is energy infrastructure you have in place. So you can go to a power plant and say, as is, this is the level of the key performance indicators in terms of the heat rate, in terms of output of energy, how much they produce, in terms of operations and maintenance cost, and then calculate if you improve these key performance indicators, how many benefits they can get, measure the millions generated on one-time or recurrent basis. It could be sometimes in one of the cases where I have been involved, like 8 million benefits per year. It could be 26 million benefits per year. We have another example in Pakistan where improving heat rate for one of the companies by 0.5% can lead to 10 million benefits per year. So over 20 years could be 200 million. And then you have an overall benefits with respect to the Sustainable Development Goals, with respect to the European goals, for example. And the whole benefits have been measured by the World Economic Forum globally to be around $2 billion benefits, $2 trillion benefits for the whole economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maheer Chebbo.